Good evening. I will now call this meeting to order. Our first order of business tonight is to adopt the agenda for tonight's meeting. Commissioners, is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Got a motion, can I get a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, the motion carries. Our next order of business is to adopt the minutes from our June 4th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting. Commissioners, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
A motion, can I get a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. We are now moving on to our discussion items. The first item for discussion and action tonight is item 3.1, consider a variance at 7321 Tamarack Trail. I will now turn it over to City Planner Brian McCain for a staff presentation and then open a public hearing for those in the chambers this evening that wish to speak on the request.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Yes, tonight we do have a request from the property owner at 7321 Tamarack Trail. The request is for an increase in the allowed impervious amount for the property. The property is located just north of County Road 13. It's adjacent to Tamarack Lake and a portion of the Arboretum. It's zoned PUD with R1 underlying zoning, and it is part of the Overlook at Tamarack Lake subdivision, which was approved in 2004. So the pool request for this evening, the applicant previously applied for permits back in March, prior to a similar request that you guys reviewed recently. That had a 25% impervious issue that was noticed by staff that was relayed to the applicant. They ended up applying for the variance on May 2nd, which was prior to the last meeting that you guys reviewed a similar request for a pool variance. The variance was suggested as a path for remediation, but not recommended by staff based on City Council's feedback from their meeting on May 13th. And then just for some additional reference, other properties in the neighborhood did receive pools prior to that ordinance change we've discussed in the past in 2020. So I've highlighted the two properties that received those pools and the subject property for discussion this evening in the blue. As part of their application, they are proposing 28.8% removal of existing trees on the site, which comes out to 36 inches of their total 125. As you know, 20% is allowed without replacement obligation, so they are required to replace 11 inches on the site, which comes out to 5 replacement trees. For the variance and shoreland requirements, the applicant is proposing to exceed that 25% impervious allowance. It does not meet the bluff definition, so it's exempt from any bluff impact zone setbacks in our shoreland ordinance. It does have a current impervious surface of over 25%, just barely, and after the pool, it would be 39% impervious. Part of the DNR review includes that definition change that we've discussed in the past for impervious surfaces, with pool surfacing becoming part of that definition. Prior to 2020, pool surface area wasn't included in impervious surface calculations, but since then they are with the new ordinance change. The DNR has reviewed this request and just has two requirements. The first one being that any stormwater over 25% is captured and treated with plans from a licensed engineer. The applicant has completed that and submitted to the DNR for review. And they would also like to see native plantings incorporated for their tree replacement obligations. Now, the applicant is aware and has a list from the DNR of trees that would be acceptable for native planting, so that is in process. And then regarding the engineering comments, Kara, our city engineer, did review this request and noted that on their plan, they've indicated type B soil, which has not been seen in Victoria yet. We have a typical standard without real soil borings for each individual property to tell us what type of soil there is. Mostly throughout Victoria, you see type D, that clay with a low infiltration rate. So what that means for the applicant is, as part of their engineering for that additional stormwater, they may have to do filtration basins instead of infiltration basins, which could increase the cost for the applicant. But the applicant is aware of this potential change going into the meeting this evening. Now, the variance, as you know, we have to review 3 standards for variance criteria. The first one being, is the request reasonable? Yes, a residential pool is a reasonable request for a residential property. The third one being, will their request alter the essential character of the neighborhood? As I mentioned, there are 2 other pools in the neighborhood currently, which would not result in an alteration to the neighborhood's character. And then the second criteria are the hardships unique and not created by the landowner. Excuse me. The reasoning provided by the applicant included the lot dimensions do not provide a sufficient area for a newly developed lake lot based on our current shoreline standards. The requirement for a newly developed parcel in this area, similar to theirs, would require a 20,000 square foot minimum and a lot width of 125 feet. Now, I don't believe any of the lots within that overlook at Tamarack Lake subdivision meet those requirements because they are new standards, so they're just lawful non-conforming lots with our shoreline standards. And then additionally, that impervious definition change from 2020, which if you watch the council meeting from May 13th, I think our council agreed that it isn't a justification for a unique hardship because it has to be specifically related to the property and not an ordinance change. So for the public hearing this evening, it was noticed in the newspaper, the Waconia Sun-Patriot, on June 6th. We did mail notifications to property owners within 350 feet of the property. It was also posted on the website and the monitor at City Hall. As of tonight, we have not received any comments from any neighbors on the request. So with that, I have 3 sample motions for you on the screen this evening. The first one being to approve the variance, the second to deny, and then the third to table, which is not recommended because their 60 days expires on July 1st, which would be prior to our next meeting. With that, staff can stand for questions, and the applicant is in the audience this evening.
Thank you. Does the applicant wish to speak tonight?
Yeah, please. Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. Thanks for the chance to speak with you this evening. My name is Tyler Schultz. My wife and I are the homeowners at 7321 Tamarack Trail, and just want to go over a couple things related to our request. First, why we want a pool. Second, why we think we have a unique hardship. And then third, why I think it's a reasonable request for you to consider. So we moved to Victoria in 2013, didn't know much about the community, but quickly fell in love with it, loved the small town feel, loved the family atmosphere. I grew up in a small town in southern Minnesota, and it just fit with us really well. We had an opportunity to leave for a job change in 2015, so we left for about 2 years. And then we came back to the Twin Cities in 2016 and didn't really know where we wanted to live. We wanted to be in the western suburbs, we wanted to be in Victoria, but we also wanted to find a nice home. We found the property at 7321, loved it, fit a lot of the stuff that we needed as a family, and one of the big things that we wanted, and it fit at that time, was a big backyard for a pool. I mean, this is something my wife and I talked about for ever since we had our first child, having a pool and kind of having that shared area to have friends and family and other people over to our house. So at that time, we bought the house in 2016. We planned on putting a pool in 2018. And then life happens. We had another kid, our third child, and it made no sense to put a pool in with a toddler or a baby. So we decided to push those plans off until she could learn to swim. And here I stand 6 years later. She's completed 3 years at Foss, and she's good to go. And we've got an 11-year-old and 13-year-old as well. And as much as we want the pool for our youngest, you know, I don't know how many people here have had teenagers before, but they're starting to want more freedom. And providing a place for them and their friends to congregate, I think is really important to us. We want a safe place. We would love to get them off their screens. We just want a pool to kind of create that atmosphere for our kids and their friends. So that's why we want the pool. When we went and approached Southview, who's here with me tonight, about a plan, I was, I guess, surprised to learn about the ordinance change. I didn't know that had happened. We put up the 2 pictures of our neighbors who have pools, and I think they must be over it, but I think they must have been pre-2020 maybe. So it was a surprise to us because we thought we would be good to go just based on our neighbors' feedback. So we think that's somewhat unique. We bought a house, we planned to put a pool in, we had a kid, we had to push it back, and now the ordinance has changed and we don't have that ability. So for me, again, it's up to you guys, but for me that seems fairly unique. And then why is it reasonable? So Josh and Willie can explain more, but the plan that we put together doesn't change the water runoff at all from where we are today with our 25%. It captures everything additional that we're looking to put in, and I think impervious limits are put in place for water runoff. So if we can take care of water runoff and still do what we'd like to do, it seems very reasonable, at least in my opinion. So I think, you know, it's reasonable, it's unique in our opinion again, and then it seems to fit the neighborhood given that we've got a couple other pools in the neighborhood. So thank you for listening to us tonight. I appreciate what you guys do for the community as well. I know it maybe isn't always fun to come to these meetings, but I think Victoria is what it is because of people like you, and that's why I wanted to come back and live here. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I will now open the public hearing. Is there anyone in the chambers this evening who wish to comment on this item? Seeing no one in the chamber tonight for additional public input, commissioners, may I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. The motion carries and the public hearing is closed. I will now open the floor for the planning commission to discuss. Commissioners, any questions, comments?
Let's go first.
I guess my main concern, can you explain the filtration system and how it's maintained, how it functions? Yeah. Yes, state your name and,
Yep, Josh Collar with Southview Design. So I've been with Southview for 19 years. Geez, dating myself here, but we've done a lot of these different types of filtration or infiltration systems with hardcover. We've run into it a lot of times in smaller lot conditions like in Edina where they have major runoff issues, but a lot of times on Minnetonka and different things like that. So there's been a lot of different things developed. I'm sure you've heard, I think one of the lots in this property has permeable pavers. They did that to try and accommodate for the hardcover and stuff like that. Those work well. You have to maintain them, so there's things that you have to do to make sure that the water still can percolate through the paver system and the base and whatnot. And they work really well when you do it that way. Kind of what we're looking to do, you've heard, I'm sure you've all heard of things like rain gardens and things like that. Rain gardens work well too, but again, you're planting native plants that are going to keep a deep root system so that'll allow that soil to be able to absorb water and whatnot. Over the years, we've worked with a number of different engineers when we come into a lot of these conditions for runoff situations. We run into it especially in soils that are like this here, where you have more of a clay cap, what I would say. So you have soils that are really dense. So no matter what, if you have a yard that's pitching away into a wetland or wherever it is going, no matter what, you're going to get that runoff. It's going to go real fast. It's still not going to perk into those dense soils. So a couple things that you can do. We do this a number of different ways. Creating a system like this, you can see that we're building a retaining wall. So right now that the yard is pitched, and it's hard to see on this drawing because it's hard to see the elevation numbers. You really have to zoom in. But the yard falls away to the back of the property, obviously, like we always want, so the water doesn't go towards the house. It falls fairly steep there. That's why we have to have a wall there. Well, anytime that we create that elevation and create more of a flat surface, you're going to slow down the water runoff and you're going to allow that to percolate faster, or I would say an area for it to hold. In something like this, we work with a couple more engineers where they'll create a holding tank, or depending on what the engineer would say will work the best, we can create these voids in the ground where we either can just simply hold it, fill it with rock. We can have actual basins to allow for a much bigger void so that water can go in there and really sit, so it slowly can then percolate through the clay versus just running off fast, you know? So you do a number of different things, and that's why we bring in an outside engineer to tell us what's gonna make the most sense. Now, in this application here, we work with this engineer often to see how we can go about doing this. We put together a plan just based on a generic, this is generally what we're gonna do on a system like this to accommodate the hardcover. So if we're at 5% over hardcover, 10% over hardcover, and even based on the conversation that we've had with the DNR, they're saying, we're fine with this as long as you can mitigate that in a large 1-inch rain event or something like that, the overage of the hardcover, which we clearly are doing here. Now, we're not representing it maybe perfectly only because we haven't done soil borings. We're just holding off on that cost until we're at a point where we can say, yeah, get the soil borings and then tell us how big of a well we're gonna do. So whether it's just gonna be a hole that we have to dig a pit, fill it with rock of a certain size to allow a certain amount of void space so that we can take that water and it holds and can slowly perk, or whether it's in a big container that we have to do. There's a number of different ways, I guess, to answer your question on how we would go about doing that, but we'll let the engineer tell us. When we do a system like this, one very similar, just right up the road from you guys here on Minnetonka, what we ended up having to do was a large basin area where we had to use containers that hold up the water, so the whole thing is a void that allows water to then hold in that area on a big event, and then it can slowly just start perking into the water table, which is in a sense what we're trying to do with hardcover. So then instead of just having that runoff, it can go through the soils. So that's kind of what we would be doing in an event like this. So it just depends on what the engineer is gonna tell us and how big that basin would be. Now, you can still have soil and sod over top of that. If you know anything about your soils, obviously sand will perk water really fast. Black dirt will hold water. That's why we always have black dirt underneath our sod, so our root system will take and your sod looks green. Clay is usually pretty hard, depending on which clay we have, and that usually will allow water to push off, so you're watering your sod a lot more on a clay surface than you, or even sand where it goes really fast versus black dirt. So on something like the one we just finished, we had a big void. We had to have fabric on top of it, black dirt, and we put sod on there, and then we had openings for where the water is able to just drain into, and then we can grade everything to that area so that all of the water can hold. On this particular instance, we're doing two things. We're holding up the area so the yard doesn't pitch all the way down, and then we're directing all of the water into those basins, as you see those blue lines that are kind of dotted blue lines in the sod that go into that basin area. So we're actually taking all of the water on that hardcover from pool deck, from all of the patio space, everything. And not only are we just grading it to those basins, we're also putting it in PVC so that PVC can run right in there and it isn't even going on the surface. So what we'll do on a plan like this, when the engineer gives us a final drawing, is we'll say, okay, if we're gonna be 10% over hardcover, and based on these soil conditions, we wanna capture on a major rain event all of that extra, what would be overage on your hardcover, and put this in this area so that that water can sit and slowly perk into the water table, which is what we want. So that's how we're able to do it. So a rain garden where you have to pull plants and pull weeds and you gotta make sure there's a lot of maintenance on it. That's kind of why those aren't done a lot. Something like this, we have open voids to where that water can go right in. So, and we can leave those open too. So we can have, we've done it before in certain counties and on certain things where they'll ask us to leave an area that can come and get inspected if they want to see that the water is still moving fast. So you can certainly do something like that too, or we can hold a hose on the area and show you how much it can hold, things like that. So that's on something like this. It's real simple. There isn't really a lot of maintenance to it. We just want to make sure that everything is graded to it and all of our lines go right into that area. So we're capturing more than what we would be overage on the hardcover there, and we're flattening the lot so it doesn't have such a pitch and runoff. Long-winded answer to your question, but
It was like all the gutter system for the house going into it or not?
We actually, on this particular instance, we could. We do have gutter systems on the house, yes, going to the one on the side. So everything from the roof line would be going into the one on the side. It's kind of hard for me to. So the bottom right, yep. So your downspouts will go into a catch basin, which will be not, we don't use drain tile or anything that can flex or bend or anything like that. So we use a hard PVC. So that'll be able to go right into that basin there. And then another basin on the top, which will take the deco drain from the pool and any runoff, everything does still have to run away from the pool. So then all of the runoff is gonna run right into there as well. So we're literally taking all of that water instead of letting it pitch. Even on a rain event, it's gonna pitch more than the way we have it now and run off faster. So we're trying to capture everything.
Okay. I'm just not,
I'm not an engineer with that either, so that's why I let them tell me how to build it, and then we build it to that spec.
I'll ask you a question. Do you have the other ones that you've done, have they been in areas with impervious restrictions where this mitigated that issue and got them back into a flush?
Yep. So one of them last year was in, what was that? Which one was that? Large one. Was in Minnetonka. We run into it in Edina a lot because the lot sizes are small.
So is the DNR in their recommendation and review of this, I mean, the DNR has a lot to do with our impervious percentages and recommendations, so they know what those are, and then if they want you to get back below that, do they consider this like call it a net impervious, because it's not
Yeah, so
real impervious, but net, you're doing more than it
we're doing
was
more
before?
than what would be considered right now generally. So like my understanding, and I can let Willie talk here too, because Willie kind of does more of the permitting now on our team. But basically, yeah, from what our understanding was that the DNR wanted you guys kind of enforce what the DNR is asking in this location, correct? So then when we reached out to the DNR, they're familiar because we work with them obviously all over the place. And so they're familiar with doing engineered wells like this. So they're fine with us doing that per the conversations we've had, as long as we just give them the engineered drawings and show them how we're mitigating that water. So to answer your question, yeah, to me, it depends on what the code is for, and if we're enforcing it here because the DNR is asking us to, and then we meet with the DNR and show them the plan and they're good with that, I guess that's what we were looking to do, and that's why we talked to the DNR.
Got it.
So just in following up, so this is the infiltration system, and like we said, we don't know necessarily if it would be a different soil type, which might
Yep,
require the
would change
filtration.
the engineering, yep,
Yeah.
the engineering would change, yeah.
And so long as that plan gets reviewed by the DNR and
Yes,
and it's adjusted in cost, whatever that might, factor into it, because we don't know that. In terms of the compliance, then it's being met. So at that point, then it's more of a judgment on letting you do what totally makes sense. That's how I was reading this last night is.
Same. The question I have for Brian would be, because they're already, right, so they're out of compliance if you were to just calculate. If they were to put in this rainwater mitigation and get down to, say, 18%, then they wouldn't need a variance because they would just be able to build their pool, right?
do you mind if I answer that real quick? So he's saying the same thing I am, I just don't, so the little bit difference though is, before the ordinance was changed, right, it was that they didn't count the pool, and I think, Brian, if you tell me right, it was a 3-foot apron around was it just the pool, or was it 3? Something like that. So when we went to the code originally to pull permit, we would have technically, were thinking we were gonna be under hardcover, because it didn't include the pool and the apron around the pool. That was just how the code was written, right? And so now that when everything changed, when the ordinance changed, and now you have to add the square footage of the pool against that hardcover and the apron around the pool, then all of a sudden we exceeded that. And so that's why you're seeing that we're at that whatever we are, I don't remember, 39%. So what we're doing is when we meet with the engineer, and we've had it before where we don't want to spend that much more money on the engineering until we get the approval, like, yes, let's move forward with this. And then we can do our soil borings, and they can tell us how big these voids need to be. But what we would do is the engineer would say, okay, instead of you're at 39%, and we need to get it down to 25. how are we capturing that delta? What's that difference look like? So we have to capture that in our basins, in a sense, so that we can get under that 25%. Does that
No,
make
I
sense?
got it, but my question was avoiding the variance by putting in the basins ahead of time, thereby being substantially lower and then doing what you want to do as a property owner.
Yeah, Chair and Commissioner Sikora, those other communities that he mentioned, Minnetonka and Edina, they probably have shoreland ordinances that have net impervious versus ours is a flat impervious. So that's where the variance comes in for this request. It's something we can certainly look into to do a net impervious in the future to avoid situations like this in the future, especially if other communities have been able to do that. I think that'd be really good.
I mean, I guess I feel like our job is to look at things and to make sure they're reasonable. They don't stand out in the neighborhood. And if they're outside, we would approve a variance. But in this situation where you end up net, like I'm thinking about the city council too, right? They just had this kind of fairly controversial meeting, but I don't think we were talking about the kind of, it's apples and oranges a little bit.
Just to piggyback off that, like, Brian, this might be for you guys. So let's say this approves and goes forward or whatever, and one of the neighbors goes to renovate or redo their pool, like, do they then have to go through this too? And are we gonna get the same problem? Because then they're gonna have to go put in this type of system, and so like to his point, like, would it be better to
Yeah.
look at longer term?
Yeah, technically, what they have, those other properties, is lawful non-conforming status because they got the pool approvals prior to the ordinance change, and now if they were to come back today, it's out of compliance with what our current standards are. You are allowed to maintain a lawful nonconformity, so if they were doing a patio replacement for their outer edge of their pool or something, that's a maintenance item. Gotcha. But if they were to make a reduction in the size of the pool or try to expand that pool, yes, they would have to go through a similar process that the applicant is doing today.
And so, Brian, the ordinance changed on the 25%, so technically they're in lawful noncompliance on just the fact that their impervious is exceeding something that changed prior, subsequent to them buying
Correct.
already. So it's,
Right.
trying to get that right. But yeah, so it's
I mean, can we make a recommendation to
Can
make
you,
it net? Like, can we do that as part of this, or does that have to be outside of this?
No, that would be a separate ordinance that we'd have to publish,
Sure,
post
sure.
for, and go
We'll get
through the
greedy
whole
again.
process right from the start.
Yeah, I mean, it's, the short term is they've got kind of the time stop on this one. It may be something for the city to think about.
Yeah.
How do we
My
do
que-
it long term?
I guess my question is, the lot our ordinance is 25% hardcover. Even if they weren't putting the pool in and just expanding the patio, just making and putting a hot tub in, making it bigger, they'd still be out of compliance, because I'm talking like down the road, I mean, all these developments we're approving now have smaller lots, they keep getting smaller lots, and down the road, we're gonna get into, well, I wanna put this in, or I wanna put that. Well, you're over hardcover just with the house. And we're creating these nightmares for the future for everybody. That I'm just looking at your plan going, even if you wanted just to expand your patio and make it without the pool, you're still out of compliance because you're over 25%. And now the net mitigation, I mean, yeah, you could still put in these filter gardens or whatever, or filter areas to put your patio in to stay in. So, I mean, not that I'm against, as long as the filtration systems have a net zero, we're still, or better, I guess I'm fine with that. But I'm just looking down the road to all these,
Yeah, can we recommend that we put that net out there for another meeting, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something we can do. It won't require any official motion from you guys tonight. We'll just put that
Okay.
on our list.
I guess,
Towards the
what
top
about-
of our list. How about that?
One of the things that,
Because, yeah, if you're gonna put in a patio and your net, that's what I'm saying, that,
what is the long-term, like, do pools get checked? Often, like, once a year, once every 2 years, to see if they're, in compliance with any sort of city regulations?
They get reviewed and inspected with the initial building permit, but we don't require any sort of yearly inspections with pools.
And
Private pools.
how about our stormwater system in neighborhoods? How often are those inspected?
Depends on the conditions of approval for those. So if you're talking about like a residential pool versus like a development stormwater ponds, those have much different regulations attached to them and require yearly or possibly even monthly or semi-monthly inspections, so.
Yeah. I guess I'm just thinking along the lines of if this is something that we get to net and neighborhoods start to develop and utilize these standards, then we just want to make sure they're maintained and work the way they're designed. And I don't know that there's a simple way to do that.
There is. There's a simple way to check them anyway, because we've run
Is it like an effluent meter or something that you?
Well, you can do a simple test, like in Edina, for instance, I just referenced that because we run into it all the time there. When new build in Edina, if they do a tear down and rebuild and the lot's small, they have to have one of these holding areas, one of these areas to let the water percolate. Sometimes they'll just make them create a swale and then the water holds there in this wet grass and then it slowly can percolate into the water table. This is much more efficient. This is engineered, so as long as we have an opening that we can, open and pour water in there and you can see how much it can hold and then slowly before it just overfills, that gives you an idea of how much of that overflow it'll take and then it can slowly just percolate into the water table. I guess, so that's a way to test them.
But is that like they require that test yearly or 2 years
Some
or?
require it, yeah. Some don't.
Do we do that in any neighborhoods, Brian?
Not that I'm aware of, no. That might be a Kara question, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, back to the clay. Now, was that fill? Where there's that level of clay soil?
Oh, they don't know what's in there yet.
Yeah, no, we will have the engineer pull soil plugs, and then they'll tell us what the soil conditions are, and then based on those soil conditions, will tell us how big of a holding area we need to contain the excess hardcover
Yeah.
water in a big rain event. And then
So there's a formula
yeah,
per se.
it's way above my pay grade, but yeah, there's.
And kind of to that point, so, if we were to approve the variance, what we're trying to get to is like, again, there's still work to be done in terms of the engineering and the technology, the tests and the standards that DNR is going to require. What kind of assurances would we have that those types of things get followed up upon? Because again, you're not going to invest in certain things until there's a basis for.
Normally we get an approval with a condition of
conditions.
this.
It's then in
So-
the permit,
Yeah,
kind of a
so
permit.
the conditions need to be met when we finalize the permit with Brian and stuff, so that's normally how we would do that.
Yep, and that can also be part of the building permit as well. We could make sure those conditions are satisfied before issuing the building permit.
That's what I was thinking.
Inspection and everything else,
Yeah.
so.
any other comments, questions?
No? Make a motion? I will make a motion to recommend the city council approve the variance with the discussed filtration criteria and engineered work that needs to be done here.
I'll second that.
Yeah, motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Good luck.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Our second item for discussion and action tonight is item 3.2. Consider a conditional use permit amendment for Holy Family Catholic High School. I will now turn it over to Associate Planner Travis Beardsley for staff presentation, and then I will open the public hearing for those in the chambers this evening that wish to speak on this request?
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. We have a request tonight from Holy Family Catholic High School for a conditional use permit amendment. Their request is to amend a resolution or their original conditional use permit back in 1999, and it's to install a new scoreboard, which would be a freestanding scoreboard. This would be covered as a dynamic display sign. So far in the process, we're at the public hearing, but staff has reviewed this and worked with the applicant through the amendment process, looking at their needs and also discussing some challenges that come with placement with the sign. So if we look at the existing conditions of the site, the picture on the left is our existing scoreboard. That scoreboard is approved by the conditional use permit from 1999 to be placed on the south wall of the gym. On the image to the right, you'll see a square, a red square. I apologize, that is really hard to see, but it's on the north side of the track. And that's where they're proposing to put their new scoreboard. The proposed amendment is to replace, not to keep both. Where you see the image of the football player, this is all lit up and basically works like a TV would. So it is 34 by 38 feet in total size. That includes the pylon supports to get it off the ground. The current conditional use permit allows for a maximum height of 40 feet for the property itself. And then the maximum sign area that we looked at for the actual display would be 900 square feet. So it is a large display. It is a large scoreboard. Couple of things that we looked at for the amended conditions is that we want to provide long-term flexibility so that instead of stating that there's a specific location that they can have the display, in the future, if they wanted to move their athletic field or anything like that, they'd be allowed to do so without having to come back to the city council and the planning commission and ask permission to move the scoreboard. We did take a look at different restrictions that we would want, including the hours of operation, the brightness, the size, specifically in square feet and its maximum height, as well as looking at restrictions such as its closeness to residential properties. The hours of operation would be restricted to events taking place on the athletic field, so it doesn't become a billboard for advertisement when nothing's going on. We also looked at making sure that it's only one lighted sign, so when this sign would be constructed, if approved, the current scoreboard would have to be taken down. We also looked at nuisance mitigation because going through this process, and we looked at other different cities and what they do, that type of nuisance. We did receive 2 phone calls. Unfortunately, nothing written, but 2 phone calls with residents expressing concern about the sign and about it creating light in their property, in their backyards, and affecting the usefulness of their home. And that's one of the reasons we put mitigating factors in, so the city would still have an ability to deal with those type of nuisances or complaints as they come forward. For the public hearing tonight, it was noticed in the Waconia Sun Patriot. We've notified all the property owners within 350 feet of the property. The notice has also been posted on the city website and at City Hall, and we've received no official comments. The 2 phone calls, we did request that they put their comments in writing and provide it to the city. That was not done. There's a couple sample motions for tonight. There's 4 in total. One is to recommend the approval of the amendments. And these amendments are additions to the current CUP. They're not rewriting the CUP. There's a motion to recommend to the City Council to approve the request with changes to what staff has prepared. There's a motion to deny the request and a motion to table the application. We can hold off on a decision until October 1st of this year. That'd meet the 120 days, which includes the 60-day extension.
Thank you.
I assume they'd want this up before the start of fall football, et cetera, et cetera.
I believe,
Close out the October 1st.
Commissioner, that is definitely their intention to get through this process as quick as possible.
Thank you. I will now open the public hearing. Seeing no one here tonight, can I get a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I will now open the floor for the planning commission to discuss. Commissioners, any questions or comments?
What's the size of the sign compared to others, schools in the area, whether Waconia or Chanhassen or Chaska?
Commissioner, that's a good question. As far as the size goes, when it comes to scoreboards, it depends on the field and placement and things like that. But there has been a trend that getting larger signs, especially the dynamic display signs, they're getting bigger. One of the things that we'd put in to here was maximizing that square foot in height, and that way in the future, if they want to do one that wrapped around part of the field, well, it's the square footage because that could be the trend. But the trend has been going bigger. The current sign that's on the school is about the same size. It's just not as bright.
Wait a second, so the scoreboard that's in the current location is the same size?
It's not exactly the same size, but this is about a 38-foot wall. So that's,
All the way to the floor, all the way to the dirt?
yeah, all the way down here.
The sign itself.
The sign itself is it's a little bit smaller than what's being proposed.
Can I go back to two facts? It was 34 by 38 and it has a height restriction of 40?
Correct. If
It's 6 feet above the ground.
it's 6 feet or 40 feet is the maximum that it can be, including the pylons above the ground. During the original conditional use permit, there was an approval to allow for a tower to be up to 40 feet and for the sign on the gymnasium to not be higher than the building itself. So that restriction would stay in place, just move from the building to the field.
But that's what I'm getting at. So max height of 40,
40, correct.
but it's 34 feet.
It's 34 feet wide and 38 feet in total height. The reason that 40 feet is the recommended is because then it stays in line with the original conditional use permit.
So how far above the ground will it be?
I apologize.
How far above the ground will it be?
The top of the sign,
The bottom of the sign,
the bottom of the sign,
2 feet?
2 feet,
no.
according to this map.
What's
No,
So if,
The math isn't,
I don't think so.
so
what's the dimensions of just
If-
the
There you go.
sign?
the sign is.
if in the packet, I have listed their building permit or their application
Yeah,
for the
sorry,
sign.
I need
And
a refresher on that.
the bottom of the sign would be, I got in my math real quick, I apologize. About,
19 feet high, 33 wide.
it'd be about,
the
it'd be
video.
about 10 feet above the dirt to where you see the sponsor spots, and those are non-lit.
Didn't
Are
remember.
those considered part of the scoreboard?
The whole, yep, the
Or
whole,
the sponsor spots, are those considered part of the scoreboard? We're
correct.
just talking about the display.
The proposed scoreboard is for 894 square feet.
The bottom of the sign will be 10 feet off the ground.
Yeah, I just couldn't remember. Yeah.
My other question, if you can go to like, they had the picture of the field, was there any discussion about putting it closer to the road so that like it goes back towards the school?
Commissioner, that discussion was taking place by staff during one of our development review meetings. In the packet on the last page, there's a layout of all the infrastructure that's in the ground. And when we were going through looking at conditions, one of the things was, and I will pull that up actually.
I think you get too close to those houses also.
You don't get.
Yeah, I was just curious if that had already been
Might be
considered
facing-
and
it'd be
crossed
facing
off.
the back.
Yep, absolutely. We want to make sure that regardless of the location of where the billboard would go, it wouldn't create Where am I?
Yeah, I'm getting confused myself.
Sorry. So we want to make sure that it wouldn't create any situation that would, that would make it so that the city is unable to maintain any public infrastructure, as well as make it difficult. There we go. Sorry, trying to do two things at once.
That's okay.
So.
Doing great.
So we are looking, originally, they had looked at the placement along the south side. But there is public infrastructure in the ground.
Sure.
And it's too close that if we have to dig it down to get equipment and things in there, the sign would have to be moved. It's not really a cost anybody wants to go through or the hassle of going through that. And then with their placement on the north side, we did have a discussion about where it would go as far as how close it could be to the parking area as well as to any infrastructure. Public Works recommended a setback of 20 feet, so that has been written into the additional conditions.
Oh, thanks. I was just making sure that south side was explored and crossed off, so that would mitigate the neighbors' concerns.
Is there any audio coming out of that sign?
No.
Or is there a separate PA system?
Commission, there's no audio coming out of the sign, nor is audio permitted as part of the conditions. So the PA system that they currently use for events on the athletic fields, that's their audio. They don't get to add more. There's no buzzer. There's no loudspeaker or anything like that.
And so the current sign is basically on that south-facing wall.
Right here.
Yeah.
So you're moving from here down to here is their proposed location.
Is there any studies or restrictions on road distractions?
With it being a county road, we have mentioned that we want to make sure that the county is okay with the placement of the sign before the city would issue a building permit. That also goes into the restrictions that we put in, that if it is too bright or if it becomes a nuisance or hazardous, especially to motorists, that type of stuff would be mitigated as it comes forward.
I don't know how you mitigate it.
You can turn down the brightness of the sign is the big thing. So they can't have it on, you can't have it on a day setting for an 8 o'clock football game. It's not designed to light up the field. It's designed to have it to be a display, not a light, so.
So has there, with other schools, has there been any, it's principal purposes for sports? Are other schools using it for advertising revenue?
Commission, I do apologize. I did not look into that question prior to the meeting. However, we did put a condition or an additional condition in that says that,
Basically,
I wrote it specifically in that it can't be used as an advertising platform outside of an athletic event.
they can't advertise it, homecoming coming up, or this event or that event at the
If
school, or
we
So it's
any of
either-
that type of.
really tight.
Yep, Chair Commission, if we allow a condition for advertising, we can't restrict the content of that advertising.
Right.
So it's either allow all of it or none of it.
That's what I was getting at.
School is well funded by the sponsors at the same time, so we wouldn't want to eliminate them.
Any other discussion, comments?
So kind of the conditions of the county road, it is further away than in terms of distance. I know there was some distance that was mentioned, 50 feet or something nominal, so it's
It's about,
much further away.
in Chair and Commission, when we looked at the brightness of the sign, we compared it to billboard ordinances. And those billboards are a lot of times much larger and much closer to interstates and highways. So we looked at those standards, which from previous experience get vetted through a lot of different sources, especially if it's on an interstate, the federal government gets involved in those standards too, So we wrote in those type of restrictions so that it's not a beacon. It serves a specific purpose and only that purpose.
And forgive my ignorance, this field's lit, right?
During the night, yeah, there's lights.
I mean, so like, they're lit normally anyways, so it's
The
not
light
like,
pollution is light pollution.
yeah, you're already gonna
During a
have,
game at night, and the scoreboard's gonna be, it's not gonna
it's
stay
gonna be
on all
nominal,
night.
yeah,
It's gonna turn off when the game's over.
yeah.
The commentators, the noises created by
The speakers,
PA and the.
whatever PA, the system they have.
Yeah, I think the only difference with these types of scoreboards is you're gonna get a lot more of like, you think about
You get more of the
flashy
flashes.
stuff and like, it's not just, whatever. So like, it's not just light anymore, but it's still nominal compared to, you've got how many lights lighting a football field.
I do think the current scoreboard is not distracting at all from the road, because I've gone by it before and
Yeah,
game on, hard to even find.
yeah,
But on the other hand, it's as big as this room.
yeah. I mean, you also think about like the standards of the communities, like they said, this is a standard that, so, I don't know.
This is what all the stadium, or all the fields are going to, I mean.
I mean, you go to Texas, man, those high schools have better football stadiums than our college does.
It's the reason why we're in Victoria.
That's right, that's right. Difference. Not saying we need to do that.
I like the Twins scoreboard.
Yeah.
They get a motion?
Motion to recommend the city council approve the requested CPU amendments for Holy Family Catholic High School.
Second.
Yeah, motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, the motion carries. That concludes our discussion items this evening. Moving on to miscellaneous section of our agenda. Are there any miscellaneous items from staff?
Yeah, just a few development updates for everyone, since we try to bring those around once every meeting or so. Marsh Hollow Fourth got approved by the city council at their regular meeting last week, along with the comp plan amendment for the Huntersbrook Creekside development to allow that conservation residential district. And then the Hometown Bank did rescind their application after you all reviewed it, and so they will be coming back with a new application, which is anticipated in the next few weeks here. And then there will not be a meeting on July 2nd. We'll send out the cancellation notice this week. We don't have any items.
4th of July?
Yeah, I know. We don't have any items, and it's a holiday.
I know, me too,
so
John.
you'll get the night off then. And then additionally, we'll probably be reaching out to you guys about some League of Minnesota resources and seminars or classes that you all might find beneficial. Otherwise, staff doesn't have any updates.
Thank you, Brian. Commissioners, any miscellaneous items?
I have one quick question. Any update on the new fiber optic company that's coming into Victoria? What's going on with them and what's the timeline, et cetera?
Chair and Commission, MetroNet is working with the city on getting plans in place to install fiber throughout the community. We have set up a website through our communications. Get this pulled up. Underneath government, if I can get the mouse to work. Apologize. I'm working. Yeah. So under the projects page on the city's website, we have I'll get the link, but we do have it on the city's website. I apologize. A little nervous. First meeting I got to talk at, so I apologize a little bit. It's been a few months.
No problem.
All good.
So,
Under residence utilities.
but we are going through, a couple of things that are going to happen with the project is that as the project moves into different neighborhoods, there'll be signs put up. In addition to that, there's also going to be flyers mailed out to residents. So if you do have, say, an invisible dog fence or sprinklers or things like that that might need to be moved, you'll have an opportunity as a resident to fill out a form, get it to MetroNet. MetroNet has been working throughout Carver County, and they've been successful in other communities with their communications and with the project task. So, but they are working closely with the city and multiple departments.
Do we have any idea what the total project time would be from start to finish? I mean,
So-
roughly?
It's going to be a while, is the short answer. We're still working on finalizing timelines. There are needs of public works staff for locates as well as notices, and there could be project delays, so I'd be hesitant to finalize a timeline at this point before I know more information.
I did find it on the website. I know why you didn't, because of course you didn't go to street and maintenance projects. But it does say 24 and 25, trying to be complete in 25.
There we go. Yep.
Yeah.
So another question that came up at a neighborhood event last week was the status of the Victoria House. Any news at all on that?
Chair, Commissioner Iverson, unfortunately not. Staff has not heard any updates on the Victoria House site.
Fair enough.
Any other comments? If not, could I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.